Millionaire catches cleaner. Studying in the dark. What happens next surprises everyone. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard Sterling's sharp voice echoed through the empty penthouse at 3 a.m., causing the 26-year-old woman to look up from the books scattered across the marble floor. Kesha Williams remained seated, disturbingly calm, her small flashlight illuminating the pages of advanced calculus. Around her, cleaning supplies and neatly organized rags showed that she had already finished her shift. But here she was, studying as if that $30 million penthouse were her private library. "Mr. Sterling," she replied in a controlled voice that made something stir in the millionaire's chest. "I'm done cleaning. I was just taking a moment to study before heading home." Richard descended the marble stairs with heavy steps, his silk pajamas contrasting sharply with the cleaning lady's simple uniform. At 42, he had built a state empire by being ruthless to those who didn't know their place, and a cleaning lady studying in his home definitely didn't know hers. Study? He laughed contemptuously. "Do you have any idea where you are? This isn't a public library. It's my home, and I pay you to clean, not to play student." Kesha slowly closed the book, putting away the $5 calculator she had bought at a convenience store. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved. Unhurried, unafraid, like someone who had weathered far worse storms and survived. "With all due respect, sir, I finished all my work. The house is spotless, just as I always leave it." Her calm response only angered Richard more. For 6 months, Kesha had been invisible to him. Just another employee who showed up, cleaned, and disappeared. But finding her there with college, books, studying advanced calculus as if she had the right to dream beyond her station, stirred something primitive in his mind. "Listen carefully," he said, leaning closer, trying to intimidate her with his height. "People like you have a place in society. Don't pretend to be something you're not. It's pathetic." That's when something changed in Kesha's eyes. For a moment, Richard saw a glint that made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't anger, it was something much more dangerous. The quiet certainty of someone who holds a secret too, powerful to reveal too soon. "People like me," she repeated slowly, savoring each word. "Interesting perspective, Mr. Sterling." During those 6 months working in the penthouse, Kesha had been more observant than Richard could imagine. She had overheard business conversations, seen documents left carelessly on the desk, and witnessed meetings where dubious deals were struck. Information an arrogant millionaire would never expect a cleaning lady to understand, or worse, to methodically file away. "You're fired," Richard declared coldly. "Pick up your things and leave, and don't even think about asking for references." Kesha stood up slowly, gathering her books with the same dignity with which she had opened them. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned to Richard with that same enigmatic smile that had unsettled him minutes earlier. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice echoing off the marble walls, "have you ever heard the saying about not underestimating those who are always watching?" The question hung in the air like a veiled promise as Kesha walked out of the penthouse, carrying not only her books, but 6 months of meticulous observations about a man who had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because Kesha wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was an economics student who had graduated summa cum laude and had spent half a year gathering evidence of illegal practices that Richard never imagined she could understand. The next morning, Richard Sterling woke up with a strange irritation he couldn't explain. The scene from the previous night replayed in his head, not the insubordination, which he was used to dealing with, but that look, that calmness, as if she knew something he didn't. "Ridiculous," he muttered, adjusting his $1,000 Italian tie. "A cleaning lady trying to intimidate me?" But his irritation only grew when his personal assistant, Janet, entered his office looking worried. "Mr. Sterling," she began, "the cleaning company called. They want to know why Kesha Williams was fired. Apparently, she's the highest-rated employee they've ever had." "Reason?" Richard scoffed. She didn't know her place. I found her studying in my home as if it were a public library. Unacceptable. Janet hesitated. Sir, may I ask what she was studying? I don't care if it was a gossip magazine or an instruction manual. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Domestic employees do not study in their employers' homes, period. What Richard didn't know was that while he was fuming in his luxurious office, Kesha was at the small neighborhood library, not crying or lamenting, but doing something far more dangerous, organizing 6 months' worth of information she had meticulously collected. During her early shifts, Kesha had discovered something. Richard had a habit of leaving important documents scattered around after late-night meetings with partners and investors. Land purchase contracts, insider deals, and confidential papers lay exposed for anyone observant enough to notice. Kesha noticed, and she understood far more than Richard ever imagined. Bribery agreements disguised as consulting fees to obtain building permits in record time. Text messages coordinating price manipulation at public auctions with other businessmen. Kesha didn't just see this information. She discreetly photographed it with an old cell phone no one would suspect had a camera good enough to document evidence. Her economics degree from State University, where she graduated summa cum laude while working 3 jobs to support herself, had given her not only the technical knowledge to understand complex financial schemes, but also the iron discipline necessary to execute long-term plans. Her diploma was tucked away in a drawer in the small house she shared with her mother and 2 younger sisters. For 2 years after graduation, Kesha sent resumes to every major financial consulting firm in the city. She received only 3 responses, all polite rejections, mentioning that her profile was not a good fit for the company culture. That's when she decided to change her strategy. If she couldn't get in through the front door of the world of corrupt millionaires, she would go in through the back, literally. Getting a job as a cleaner with the company that served the city's most luxurious homes was no coincidence. It was careful planning. Kesha spent weeks studying hiring patterns, schedules, and client lists. When she learned that Richard Sterling needed a new cleaner, she applied that same day. "Do you have references?" asked the cleaning company supervisor. "I have something better," Kesha replied with that same enigmatic smile that would haunt Richard months later. "I need to work hard." For 6 months, she was invisible to Richard, exactly as she had planned. She would arrive, clean perfectly, gather information, and leave without being noticed. All the while, she collected enough material to expose him. When she finally decided it was time to leave, she needed an excuse to be fired without raising suspicion about her true intentions. Studying advanced calculus in the penthouse wasn't carelessness. It was bait. She knew Richard's religious Thursday routine. She knew he often returned early from business dinners, and she knew he would react exactly as he did, with arrogance and prejudice. Now, at the public library, Kesha opened a used laptop she had, bought with her savings, and began organizing the most explosive dossier the local high society had ever seen. Not just evidence of corruption, but a complete map of how Richard Sterling had built his $30 million empire on kickbacks, insider, information, and manipulation of public tenders. Her phone vibrated. A message from her younger sister, Jennifer, only 16. "Kush, did you get another job? Mom's worried about this month's bills." Kesha looked at the screen, then at the dozens of documents organized in front of her. For years, her family had sacrificed everything so she could study. Her mother, Barbara, worked double shifts as a nurse at a public hospital. Jennifer and Tracy, 18, shared a part-time job at a diner to help with expenses. They deserved better than a life of deprivation. They deserved justice. And Richard Sterling, who had built his fortune by trampling on people like them, was about to find out he had underestimated the wrong person. "Tell Mom not to worry," Kesha typed back. "Soon, our situation will change completely." What Richard Sterling couldn't imagine, as he bragged to his partners about putting an insolent employee in her place, was that every act of contempt had been carefully documented and catalogued by someone who not only had the evidence of his crimes, but also the academic background to understand exactly how to use that information to destroy his empire brick by brick. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside Keisha, a silent force fueled by the very injustice men like Richard sought to impose, methodically building the sentence for those who believed themselves to be above consequences. 3 weeks later. Financial reality hit the Williams family like a hurricane. Kesha's last paycheck had been used to buy high blood pressure medication for her mother, Barbara. Now there was only $43 left in her wallet. "Kush, did you get anything today?" Jennifer asked, arriving home after another double shift at the diner. At 16, she carried responsibilities no teenager should have to bear. "I'm still looking," Kesha lied, quickly closing the notebook where she had organized the evidence against Richard. She couldn't tell her family about her real plan. They wouldn't understand why she was turning down cleaning jobs, waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, Richard Sterling was living his best life. At the exclusive golf club where he met partners every Thursday, he told the story of the insolent cleaning lady as if it were a private joke. "You won't believe it." He laughed, swirling his $300 whiskey. "I found that woman studying calculus in my living room." "Calculus?" another man scoffed. "As if a cleaning lady could understand advanced math." Marcus Thompson, a young investigative journalist, working part-time as a waiter at the club to pay for college, heard every word. Marcus knew the world of corrupt power brokers well. He had grown up in the same inner-city neighborhood as Kesha, earned a scholarship through hard work, and now specialized in exposing money laundering schemes among the business elite. The next morning, he found Kesha at the public library. "Sorry to bother you," he said cautiously, approaching the table where she worked. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm a journalist. I heard you used to work for Richard Sterling." Kesha looked up, sizing him carefully. Something about his posture, the way he spoke, suggested he wasn't just another curious onlooker. "I did." "Why?" "Because I've been investigating him for 2 years, Marcus said, lowering his voice. "And I've never been able to get close enough to obtain solid evidence. Someone who had worked inside his house for months." That's when Kesha realized she had found exactly what she needed. Not just someone with access to the media, but someone who already understood Richard's methods and had the necessary contacts to turn evidence into real consequences. "What kind of evidence do you need?" she asked, opening her notebook in front of someone else for the first time. Marcus's eyes widened at the meticulous organization of the documents. Fraudulent contracts, records of suspicious payments, coordination of schemes with other businessmen, all cataloged by date, amount, and participants. "My God," he whispered. "This is enough to take down not just Sterling, but half the businessmen in this city." "I'm not done yet," Kesha replied with that enigmatic smile that had haunted Richard weeks earlier. "I have 3 more contacts who've confirmed information about fraudulent bids at City Hall." Over the next few weeks, while Kesha continued to pretend she was job hunting to reassure her family, she and Marcus worked together to build an irrefutable dossier. Every document was verified, every transaction traced, every participant in the scheme identified. Richard, completely oblivious to what was coming, made his biggest mistake yet. During a meeting with investors in his penthouse, the same place where he had humiliated her, he was filmed by a security camera offering bribes in exchange for inside information on a public housing project. The irony was delicious, the same. Man who had mocked Kesha for studying was being recorded conspiring to divert funds meant for people just like her. "We got it," Marcus said, showing Kesha the recording. "With this, plus the documents you collected, we have enough material for a series of reports that will shake the entire power structure of the city." Kesha stared at the screen. watching Richard gesticulate arrogantly as he explained how to manipulate public contracts. For a moment, she felt an almost physical satisfaction imagining his expression when he discovered he had been defeated by the incompetent cleaning lady he had so despised. "When do we publish?" she asked. "Next Monday," Marcus replied. "Front page of the newspaper, main website, simultaneous social media posts. It'll be impossible to cover up or downplay." That night, Kesha arrived home to find her mother waiting in the living room, wearing that look only mothers have when they sense something important. "My daughter, you've been different. Calmer, more determined. What are you planning?" Kesha hugged Barbara, breathing in the familiar scent of hospital disinfectant that always clung to her mother after double shifts. "Mom, remember when you said that one day our situation would change?" "I remember. That day has come. On Monday, the world will know who I really am." Barbara held her daughter's face in her hands, seeing something in Kesha's eyes that made her smile for the first time in weeks. It was the same iron determination that had taken the girl from the slums to graduate summa cum laude while working 3 jobs. "What have you done, Kesha?" "Justice, Mama, just justice." While Richard Sterling slept peacefully in his $30 million penthouse, convinced he had ended the problem of the insolent cleaning lady, Kesha Williams was putting the finishing touches on a revenge plan that would redefine not only their lives, but the entire power structure men like him used to crush people like her. What that privileged man couldn't imagine was that every act of contempt had been carefully documented by someone who not only had evidence of his crimes, but also the academic background to orchestrate his downfall so meticulously that escaping the consequences would be impossible. Monday, 6 a.m. Richard Sterling woke to the insistent ringing of his phone. First, it was his personal assistant, then the company lawyer, followed by 3 different journalists, all talking at once about explosive reports and front-page news. "What the hell are you talking about?" Richard shouted into the phone, still in his pajamas, walking into the penthouse living room where he usually had breakfast while admiring the view of the city. That's when he saw it. His own photo splashed across the front page of the region's largest newspaper, next to the headline in bold letters, "Millionaire Empire Built on Bribes and Fraud, Exclusive Documents Reveal Corruption Scheme." Richard felt his legs buckle. He picked up the newspaper with trembling hands and began to read. Each paragraph was a stab in the heart. Fraudulent contracts he was sure no one had seen, text messages coordinating bribes he had deleted, recordings of conversations in supposedly secure locations. "Impossible," he muttered, frantically turning the pages. "How did they get this?" Marcus Thompson's report was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Each accusation was backed by documents, photos, bank records, a complete map of how Richard had turned bribes into assets, insider information into competitive advantage, manipulation into an empire. But it was at the end of the second page that Richard's world truly collapsed. A photo of him offering a bribe in his own penthouse, with the exact date and time stamped below. The caption read, "Evidence provided by an anonymous source with privileged access to the businessman's residence for months." Anonymous source. "Privileged access," Richard repeated aloud, beginning to connect the dots. Months of access. His phone rang again. This time it was the president of the bank where he kept his main accounts. "Richard, we need to talk urgently. Federal auditors are already here." Before he could respond, another call came in. The mayor panicked. "Sterling, you've compromised me. I need to publicly distance myself from you immediately." One after another, all the contacts who had helped build his empire began cutting ties. Investors demanded their money back. Partners claimed to be victims of manipulation. Authorities announced criminal investigations. At 9 a.m., Richard was locked in his penthouse office, watching his life fall apart in real time on television. Anchors discussed his crimes as if they were undeniable facts. Experts calculated the years he would face in prison. His bank accounts had been frozen as a precaution. That's when the doorbell rang. "Mr. Sterling," a familiar female voice, echoed through the intercom. "It's Kesha Williams. I'm here to return something you left behind." Richard felt the air rush out of his lungs. Kesha, the cleaning lady he had humiliated and fired. The woman he had called incompetent, treated as inferior, and completely underestimated. With trembling fingers, he pressed the button to let her in. 5 minutes later, she stood before him, wearing a simple blazer but carrying a leather briefcase he recognized immediately. It was identical to the ones his lawyers used. "I came to deliver this in person," Kesha said, placing a copy of the newspaper with her photo on the front page on his desk. "I thought you might like an autographed copy." Richard watched her, trying to process the transformation. The straight posture, the direct gaze, the confidence radiating from her every movement. How had he not realized that this woman was far more than she appeared? "It was me," she whispered. "I gathered all this information for 6 months, Mr. Sterling, every time you left documents lying around the house, thinking a simple cleaning. Lady couldn't understand complex financial contracts or recognize evidence of money laundering." Reality hit Richard like a tsunami. "My degree is in economics, summa cum laude, State University," Kesha said with that same enigmatic smile that had unsettled him weeks earlier. But now he understood its true meaning. "Ironic, isn't it? You fired me for studying calculus, not knowing I had already graduated in a field that allowed me to understand every one of your criminal schemes perfectly." Richard collapsed into his chair, finally grasping the magnitude of his arrogance. "Why did you do this?" he asked. "Because men like you build empires by trampling on people like me and my family. Because you believe your position makes you untouchable?" Kesha replied, leaning forward slightly, her voice icy calm. "But mainly because you made the fatal mistake of underestimating my intelligence based solely on my skin color and social status." Richard's cell phone rang again. This time it was his own lawyer. "Richard, the IRS is confiscating all your assets. You need to turn yourself in voluntarily before they issue an arrest warrant." Kesha watched Richard receive the news, saw the exact moment he realized he had lost absolutely everything. His fortune, his reputation, his freedom. All because of the inept cleaning lady he had despised. "There's one last thing, Mr. Sterling," she said, walking toward the door. "My family no longer has to worry about financial hardship. The reward I received for cooperating with the investigation was generous enough to ensure that my mother can retire, my sisters can finish college, and I can finally work in the field I studied so hard for." Richard looked up, seeing Kesha standing in the doorway of the same penthouse where she had been humiliated weeks earlier. "You planned all of this from the beginning," he said weakly. "No, Mr. Sterling," Kesha replied. "I just prepared myself for the right opportunity. And you, with your arrogance and prejudice, gave me exactly what I needed to turn 6 months of careful observation into the evidence that destroyed your empire of lies." As Richard Sterling faced the prospect of decades in prison and the total loss of everything he had worked for, Kesha Williams walked through the city with the quiet certainty of someone who had proven that intelligence and determination will always defeat arrogance and prejudice, even when the battle seems impossible from the start. 6 months later, Richard Sterling sat in a federal prison cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that contrasted sharply with the $3,000 suits he once wore. His sentence, 15 years for racketeering, money laundering, and corruption. His $30 million empire had been completely dismantled, properties auctioned off, bank accounts seized, investments lost. The man who once looked down on a cleaning lady now shared space with criminals who treated him exactly as he had treated Kesha, as someone inferior. Meanwhile, Kesha Williams started her first day as a senior analyst at the largest financial consulting firm in the city. Her office, with a panoramic view, was in the same building where Richard once closed his corrupt deals, but she now occupied a position 3 floors higher than he had ever achieved. "Congratulations on the compliance report, Kesha," said her supervisor, Dr. Martinez. "Your analysis prevented the company from falling into a scheme similar to Sterling's. You saved our reputation." The professional recognition was gratifying, but what truly warmed Kesha's heart was seeing her family thrive. Her mother, Barbara, had retired from the hospital and now spent her days tending a small garden at their new home. Jennifer was in medical school, supported by a scholarship Kesha secured through her contacts. Tracy was studying law, inspired by her sister's story. "Kesh, did you see this?" Jennifer said, arriving home with a newspaper. The headline showed Richard being transferred to a maximum security prison after a fight with other inmates. The man who had once humiliated the cleaning lady wasn't doing well behind bars. Kesha looked at the photo without feeling satisfaction or pity. "He brought this on himself, Jen. I just documented it." The real transformation was not only in Kesha's life but also in how her story inspired others. Marcus Thompson had won an investigative journalism award for his series on corporate corruption and now ran a foundation that helped young people from the inner city report injustices in the corporate world. During a lecture at the university, where she graduated, Kesha shared her story with 500 economics students. "When that man told me that people like me had a place in society, he was right," she said, eliciting laughter from the audience. "Our place is wherever our competence and determination take us, not where prejudice tries to confine us." A student raised his hand. "How did you stay calm during the 6 months you were gathering evidence?" "Because I learned that anger without strategy is just noise," Kesha replied. "But anger with planning becomes justice." Richard, watching Kesha's interview on the prison television, finally understood the magnitude of his arrogance. The woman he had once called incompetent was now a consultant to 3 multinational companies, a sought-after speaker, and a leading figure in the fight against corporate corruption. Her former partners, who had laughed along with him when he mocked the insolent cleaning lady, now faced their own investigations based on the evidence Kesha had provided to the authorities. The exclusive golf club where they had once mocked employees had lost half its members due to the scandals. "Every person we underestimate carries potential we can't see," Kesha said in a final interview. Richard Sterling had believed that her social status defined her intellectual capacity. That arrogance cost him his freedom and his fortune. The lesson resonated far beyond one individual's downfall. Companies began reviewing their hiring practices, universities created inclusion programs, and young people in the inner city came to see Kesha's story as proof that where you come from doesn't determine where you'll go. He tried to destroy Kesha, but he ended up destroying himself. Kesha learned that true revenge is not about getting back at those who hurt you. It's achieving the success your enemies could never imagine. If this story of transformation and justice resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove intelligence and determination always defeat arrogance and prejudice, no matter how impossible victory may seem at first.